In this lesson, we are going to be looking at writing linear equations in slope-intercept form. So if you remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. The x and the y form an ordered pair. The m was the slope, and the b was the y-intercept. And in our last lesson, we were graphing using slope-intercept form. In this lesson, we're going to be practicing just writing them into slope-intercept form. So for slope-intercept form, you always want the y term to be on the left side of the equation by itself. So when you look at this equation, 9x minus 7y equals negative 7, you will see that the x term is on the wrong side of the equal sign. We want the x term, which has the slope in front of it, to be moved to the right side right after the equal sign. Now when you move a term from one side to the other, you have to use inverse operations. So since this is a positive 9x, we are going to have to subtract 9x on both sides. So I always look at it this way. I think of the equal sign as a fence, and anytime that a term jumps the fence, moves from one side to the other, you change it to the opposite sign. So when that 9x moves from the left side to the right side, it becomes a negative 9x. Now the negative 9x, or the x term, which has the slope in front of it, likes to be in the front of the line. So when it jumps the fence, it's going to move the negative 7 over because the x term wants to be the leader. Now we have all of the terms in the right positions. We have the y term on the left. On the right side, we have the x term and then the constant, which is the y-intercept. But we still don't have the y by itself. Y is being multiplied by negative 7. So now we're going to have to divide all three terms by a negative 7 to get y by itself. When we do that, negative 7 divided by negative 7 is y. And then if you look at the slope, you will see that we have negative 9 divided by negative 7. Two negatives make a positive, so our slope is just 9/7 x. That means when graphing, we're going to rise 9 and go to the left 7, or to the right 7, sorry. And then negative 7 divided by negative 7 is a positive 1. So here is our equation in slope-intercept form. Now we would be able to graph starting with the y-intercept, and then from the y-intercept going up 9 and to the right 7. Okay, again, we want the y term by itself on the left side. The x term is on the wrong side, so it's going to jump the fence and go to the other side of the equal sign. When we move it from one side to the other, we have to do the opposite. So instead of a positive 3x, it's now going to be a negative 3x when we move it to the other side. Now look at our y term. All the terms are now in the right positions. We have the y term on the left, an equal sign, and then the x term, and then the y-intercept. But the y is not by itself. Y is being multiplied by negative 2. So now we're going to have to divide both sides by all three terms by negative 2. And when you do that, negative 2 divided by negative 2 becomes 1, so you just have y on the left side of the equation. You have negative 3 divided by negative 2. When you simplify that, we're going to leave it as an improper fraction, but two negatives make a positive, so it's a positive 3/2 x. And for our y-intercept, we have negative 16 divided by negative 2, which is 8. So the equation is y equals 3/2 x plus 8. Another practice, the x term again is not in the right position, so we're going to have to jump the fence with the 6x term. It's going to become a negative 6x when it jumps the fence, and it tells the y-intercept to scoot over because he wants to be the leader. So now we have 5y equals negative 6x minus 15. The y term is still not by itself, so we're going to have to divide all three terms by 5 so that the y will be by itself. Well, 5 divided by 5 is 1, so we're just left with y on the left side. Our slope is a negative 6/5, and our y-intercept is negative 15 divided by 5, which is negative 3. Now we would be ready to graph that. Again, the x term has to jump the fence, So when it jumps, it becomes a positive 11x, changes its sign. It takes its place in the front. It tells the 32 to scoot over. The y is being multiplied by negative 4, so we're going to have to divide all three terms by negative 4. When you do that, negative 4 divided by negative 4 becomes 1, so you just have y on the left side. Here is our slope, negative 11/4, and then our y-intercept is 32 divided by negative 4, which is a negative 8. So in slope-intercept form, that is y equals negative 11/4 x minus 8. Now on this one, we'll see that the term that's not in the right position is actually the constant, or the y-intercept. So we're going to have to move this term over to the other side. And when it jumps the fence, instead of a negative 6, it becomes a positive 6. So that leaves the negative 12y on the left side of the equation. The 6 jumps the fence and it takes its spot at the end because it's not the slope, it's the y-intercept. And so we have negative 12y equals negative x plus 6. The y is not by itself. It's being multiplied by negative 12. So now we're going to divide all three terms by a negative 12. And when you do that, negative 12 divided by negative 12 becomes 1. So we have y on the left side. Here there's no number in front of the x, so it's an understood 1, an invisible 1. So you have a negative 1 divided by a negative 12. Two negatives become a positive, so our slope is 1/12. And then we have 6 divided by negative 12. And if I just simplified that as a fraction, it would be negative 1/2. Given the slope and y-intercept, write an equation for each line in slope-intercept form. So this time I'm saying, here's what the slope is. Here's the y-intercept. All you have to do is plug them into the equation. The slope goes where the m is, and the y-intercept goes at the end. So I start by saying y equals, and now I'm ready for the slope, which is 1/2 x. And then I'm going to put the y-intercept as negative 5. So I plugged this into the y-intercept, this into the slope, and there it is. You're just plugging in numbers to m and to b. If the slope is 2, we're going to plug 2 in for the slope in front of the x. The y-intercept is 4. We're going to plug it in at the end. So we simply have y equal 2x plus 4. Now we're going to look at a graph, and we're going to write an equation by looking at a graph. Well, we know two things. We know the y-intercept, and we can figure out the slope. So first, you're going to start with the y-intercept. Where does it cross the y-axis? It crosses at a positive 3. Where in our equation, the y-intercept is at the end here. So when we see where it crosses the y-axis, which is a positive 3, we know we're going to put a positive 3 right there. The only thing now is we have to figure out the slope. So from the y-intercept, we went down 1, 2, 3, which is a negative 3. And we went to the right 2, which is a positive 2. So here is our slope, and we just fill it in, negative 3/2 x. So you find the y-intercept. From the y-intercept, you're going to determine the slope, and that's all you need to write the equation. So here's our y-intercept. We figured out the slope, negative 3, positive 2. We plug in the numbers in the right places. We put the slope in front of the x, and we put the y-intercept in the right place. Okay, we always start by looking for the y-intercept. The y-intercept is a negative 3. Now we have to figure out what the slope is. So from that y-intercept, we go up 3. That's a positive 3. And we go to the right 2, which is a positive 2. So our slope was 3/2. And our y-intercept was negative 3, and we plug them into the equation. Here we look for the y-intercept. The y-intercept was 4. Now from there we determine the slope. We go down 2, or that's down 4 because the graph is by 2's. So that's down, it was down a negative 4. I know I wrote negative 2, and I'll show you why in just a minute. And then it's to the right a negative 2. And I put negative 1, but I put the simplified version. because if you simplify negative 4 divided by negative 2, both are divisible by 2. That would be negative 2 over 1, which is what I show right here. And then we plug in the numbers. So when we had the negative 2 over negative 1, we had two negatives. Two negatives become a positive. And here was our y-intercept. So we had negative 4 divided by negative 2. Negative 4 divided by negative 2 is a positive 2. Sometimes it's a little confusing when the graph does not go by 1s. This went by 2s. Okay, that was part 1 of writing linear equations. And I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to record part 2 in a different video.